On today's field tips, we're going to be talking about distance shooting using an aiming method that I haven't covered before, so stick around. All right, so today we're going to be talking about the point of aim aiming method, and I first want to describe what it is, and then we'll get into how it's going to help you hit targets at farther distances. All right, so point of aim method of aiming is kind of an antiquated method. It's something that would have been prevalent 100 years ago when people were shooting, is it the York round? I could be wrong about that. But anyway, when they're shooting long distances at big round targets. And basically all it is, it's kind of like gap shooting, but you're not really paying attention to the gap. You're actually paying attention to the spot that your arrow tip is superimposed onto the target. That might be a little bit confusing, but let me clear it up. So if you think about gap shooting, when you come back to full draw, your arrow tip is, if you're before your point on distance, your arrow tip is actually a little bit below what you're aiming at. And so that distance below is your gap. Now with point of aim, instead of paying attention to that gap, you're actually taking a physical marker and placing it on the target. And then when you come back to full draw, you're concentrating on that marker, not where you want to hit. So for instance, if I'm using the point of aim method and I'm shooting at 20 yards, for me, my gap at 20 yards is about 18 inches with this bow and arrow setup. And so if I take a marker and place 18 inches below where I want to hit, then I come back to full draw and I place my tip on that marker and I concentrate on that marker, my arrow strikes 18 inches higher right where I want it to go. Now, this really doesn't have any applicability at all for hunting in that context, because you're not going to be asking an animal to stay still while you go place a marker on its leg somewhere and in hopes of hitting a little bit higher in the kill zone. Where it does come in very handy is if you're shooting like a 3D tournament or something like that, and you're shooting beyond your point on distance. Now, I'm talking a lot about gap shooting and point on and arrow placement and all that stuff. And if you're not familiar with what gap shooting is, I'm gonna link to another video at the top of this where I cover gap shooting and aiming and back tension and all that stuff. Go check that video out, and then a lot of this stuff will make more sense. But for me, with this bow and arrow setup, my point on distance, so the distance that I'm from the target where I can come back to full draw and put my point right where I want to hit, that distance is 35 yards for this bow and arrow and the way I shoot it. Now, if I'm beyond 35 yards, say I'm at 40 yards, I have to raise my bow up so far that I can't even see the target. I can't see what I'm aiming at because my hand and the bow's riser is in the way. And so what I have to do then is revert to a point of aim method of aiming, where I'm looking at what I want to hit, and then I know how far above what I want to hit I need to aim to be able to drop the arrow into that spot. And so all I'm doing is picking out a point of aim above what I want to hit. Now, we're going to shoot at this target a couple of times from 45 yards, and I know that I'm going to have to aim about a hay bale's width above what I want to hit at 45 yards to be able to drop that arrow right down into the target where I want to hit it. And so there's a little aspen tree behind this target, and if I get it lined up just right, it'll be right above where I want to hit. So if you look from this angle, you can see this little aspen tree right here. It should be look like it's right behind the target right here. So from 45 yards, my tip is actually going to be right at the intersection of the top of this bale and that little aspen tree back there. And so if I put my tip right here, it should drop it right down somewhere around this little black spot. So this is my point of aim for 45 yards. So let's give it a try. All right, so from my perspective, that little aspen tree is directly above what I want to hit, which is that little black dot in the middle of that target down there. And so I know at this distance that my gap, or I guess you'd call it a positive gap, is at the top of that hay bale. So it's a hay bale's width above what I want to hit. And so when I come to full draw, I can't even see what I'm intending to hit. And so I'm having to pick out that point of aim above it so that I can aim at it. And so what I'm going to do is come back to full draw, and I'm going to place my tip right at the intersection of the top of that bale and where that little tree looks like it's coming out of the top of that bale. And if all works right, and I have a good back tension, good form, good release and follow through and all that fun stuff, it should drop that arrow right down into that black or somewhere close. So let's give it a try and see what happens. Let's go take a look. So, you know, whatever, an inch below or so. Now, my tip looked like it was right here when I was aiming. I was actually aiming for this spot, but I was intending to hit this spot. And so, you know, this may not be something that's super applicable in hunting, but certainly if you're out stump shooting, just playing around, or at a 3D tournament where you're having, you know, long shots, being able to, or knowing what your gap is, like if you're shooting beyond your point on distance, knowing what your gap is, or your positive gap above what you want to hit, is really going to help you hit those farther targets. So I want to mention one thing real quick about shooting these long shots. Just because you can hit, you know, a target like this at 40, 45 yards, something like that, doesn't mean that I'm going to be shooting at deer at this distance or elk. With the speeds that we're shooting with these stick bows, there is a lot that can happen between the time you drop the string back there and the time the arrow hits here. And actually, if an animal's walking or moving, they're actually covering a lot more ground than you think they're covering. And so, you know, just keep that in mind when you're hunting. Don't get a false sense of confidence that because you can hit a stationary target at distance, that you're going to be able to make the same good shot on a live animal, because the reaction time on game animals, especially something like white-tailed deer, which is the most popular big game animal in the country, the reaction time on those things is unbelievably fast. And so that deer likely isn't going to be in the same position when the arrow gets here as when you release it. So if you want to find out what your gaps are, either before your point on distance or beyond it, below or above what you want to hit, I've got another video, and I think it's called How to Find the Gap or something like that. I'll link to it at the top of the video. But you can do that. Now, all of that video covers is point on and before, but you would do it the same exact way for beyond your point on distance. Basically, what you do is get to a big target face and put one point in the middle and put your point on that for each shot for different distances. So you'd go 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever, however long you want to shoot. And you record how far above or below that point you hit. So basically you're doing the same thing we're doing here with the point of aim. You're putting your point directly on that marker at 5 yards, 10 yards, 15, 30, 50, whatever. You're putting your point on that marker. And before your point on distance, you're going to be hitting above it. Beyond your point on distance, you're going to be hitting below that. And so how far below and how far above, those are the things that you need to record, because that's going to be your gap at those various distances. So if you want more shooting tips, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, and then also look me up on Instagram at Clay Hayes Hunter, and then also Facebook. I'm constantly uploading new content there on a daily basis, and I'll put some shooting stuff up there from time to time. But the guys that are signed up for Patreon, these are the guys that are helping bring these videos to you. So you know, I get a lot of appreciation and thanks for making these videos, but it's really what it comes down to is it's those guys that are enabling me to do this stuff. So guys, I really, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate it, and everyone else does too. So if you want to help support these videos and get some pretty cool exclusive content, go over to patreon.com/Clay Hayes and check it out. There may be something there that sparks your interest. It doesn't cost very much to sign up, and you'll know that you're helping to bring these videos to everybody. So with that, get out there and fling some arrows and have a good time, and we'll see you next time.